Hello, there we go. Good morning, people. All right, now I know everybody asks you to do that kind of call and response thing, and you kind of did it, and it's early, so we're gonna put a little more energy in it because this is a gorgeous day, and you're all here, and that is so exciting. So let's just like one more time, I wanna hear how loud you can be on that good morning, okay? So, good morning, people. Good morning. That is pretty good. Thank you for being here. You've heard we're getting started, and I'm going to review my little notes to make sure that I don't leave out important information, okay? But I do want to say I'm really glad you're all here, because this is an exciting opportunity for us. I recognize many faces out there when I can see them, and some of you I don't recognize, and I'm excited that I don't know you, and I hope I'll know you by the end of this process, because if you're here, then what I do know is that you care about inclusion, and I know that you care about system change. So we're gonna embark on an adventure, and this is part of that adventure. This conference/event is the culmination of about, a little over a year's work by a lot of people. You'll find their names in the back of the program, but more importantly, 6 months ago, we began doing outreach across the state, and I had the pleasure to meet with a lot of people. If you look in your packet on the right-hand side toward the back, you will find a final report. If you haven't read that report, I really encourage you to, at a minimum, before the work activities begin today, to look at the recommendations and the comments that were made by people with disabilities all across the state. I think that will help inform your important participation in where we're going. You can build on it, add to it, and modify it. So who am I and why am I up here? Basically, my name's Nyla McCarthy. I'm in the bio book. In fact, you have a program, and I'm your moderator for the day, so kind of like your flight attendant in a way. Although if you need anything, there are people with blue tags on. And I'm gonna ask the blue tag folks, the helpers, to raise their hands or stand up and in some way, okay, everybody look around. Any of these people, you have a question, you have a need or a concern, contact one of those blue tag people, because they're really gonna help you get through the way, because I'm basically standing up here. I wanna thank the conference committee. People do that all the time, but they were here working yesterday, late into the night, early this morning. So I'd like to take a moment and let's just all thank people for working hard to make sure that you had a good time. And there are actually 4 people that I want to thank particularly, because for the past 6 months that I've been working to kind of bring this together, they have been there behind the scenes. There's a huge committee, but there were 4 people doing a lot of work, and I would like to ask them to stand up or wave for this just for a moment, because they really deserve a second of recognition. Emily Cervantes, please stand up. So much help. Shelly Emery, wherever Shelly is. Shelly's back over there. Unbelievable amount of help. The 2 team leads, Anna Feigum, I think there she is in the back of the room, all right, she's come in to join us. And of course, Kristen Darmody, who is over here, all right. So thank you, the 4 of you, so much, truthfully, from my heart. I want to thank you. So on to logistics, because that's really what I'm supposed to cover with you. Your agenda's in your packet, like I mentioned. There's a program. It includes bios arranged alphabetically for every person who's up here. I'm not going to be one of those people who stands here and reads bios to you. I don't enjoy listening to pre-read bios. You can read them yourself, we know this, so please do so. And now, as a person with many disabilities, I know you're supposed to start with a joke, so I got a little joke for you, which as a person with disabilities, I feel comfortable sharing. How many people with disabilities does it take to change a light bulb? 1, but there's an unlimited number of people to stand around and tell them how inspiring they were for doing it. Good, you got it. That is an example, you're welcome, of what's called disability porn. And it doesn't have anything to do with sex. If that's a new term for you, look it up. Disability porn is one of the ways which people, without realizing what they're doing, sometimes marginalize or make other people with disabilities from the best of intentions. Okay, back to logistics. Bathrooms, important one. Out the door, to the right, around the corner, you'll find the bathrooms. Lunch, most of you probably gave your meal preferences. You've got a color-coded little tag on the back. If you didn't, or if it's wrong, or you've changed your mind, haha, good luck on that one. But otherwise, notify one of the people with blue tags, and people will make a huge effort to accommodate what you need. We have a comfort station, especially for people with disabilities who are not used to having to sit and listen to things all day. We have a little room to the right around the corner where you can go, you can chill for a while, you can rest, get away from all the stimulus. It'll be a low stimulus room, and then just rejoin us when you feel like you're ready to rejoin us. We want to make sure that this is a pleasant experience for you. Please take the time to get to know each other while you're here. I know a lot of times we feel safe talking to the people we know and visiting with the people we know, but one of the exciting things that we're embarking on that we really do have a chance to change is to begin developing new partnerships and finding out how to work with people who think differently and or may be differently than us. So make an effort to talk to people you don't know, make an effort to make friends. And with that, I'm gonna say to those of you watching as we stream this, we are streaming, thank you for joining us. Thank you for making the effort. Everybody turn around, wave to the cameras and say, thank you for being here with us. Thank you. And then just take a moment and turn to the people at your table and thank them for being here with you. Thank you. Again, all right, thank you. Excellent. This is gonna be a great day, you guys. Lots of good stuff coming on. Evaluations, we hate them, we need them. Please fill them out at the end before you go. And feel comfortable filling things out as we go so that they're meaningful and so that the information you share with us is stuff that we can use. There will be sound cues. Emily's got some time cards here, so the speakers, we're gonna try to stay as close to possible on the agenda, but there's been some changes already because just like in life, things happen just like that. So people will get cues. There will be an audio cue of what was supposed to be a bell, so now it's gonna be a human bell sound, ding, or something, 30 seconds before people. So those of you who are speakers, those of you who are gonna be on the panel or talking, in addition to the cues that Emily will have that you can see, when you hear her go ding, ding, then you got 30 seconds to wrap up, okay? Finally, there are clearly marked exits. This is where I get to be like the flight attendant. I've always wanted to do this. So if you go out to your left and to your right, you shall find clearly marked exits. Please don't try to use the elevators or the, elevators, escalator, thank you. Don't try to use the elevators or escalators if power goes out. That's never a good plan. And it's not gonna happen though, don't worry. And finally, if you haven't gotten your travel reimbursements yet, make sure that you work with Barbara at the back table, at the far back, before the end of the day. So we wanna make sure that your being here was covered. And with that, I am now going to be quiet and I'm gonna bring up our first exciting group of people, which is Stan, and the print is like so small, Stan and Akiko and Jan and Andrew. And they're gonna give you one of the things people asked for. Actually, this is gonna be opening remarks. I just messed up. It's not all of those people. There you go. We are like a ship floating. Go for it, guys.
Good morning. Is everybody excited to be here today? I sure am, and I think it's a great opportunity where we can meet with emergency management team and people with disabilities and collaborate and talk about our needs. And I say our needs because, as you can see, I'm part of the disability community, and really help to understand and collaborate for a very, very important issue. My name is Jan Campbell, and I am the president of Disability Rights Oregon. How many people have heard about Disability Rights Oregon? Great. I also work on the ADRC of Multnomah County, Aging, Disability, and Veteran Services. How many have heard about ADRC? Oh, quite a few. That's good. So we're a resource group, and for Multnomah County, we're 24 hours, and we focus on resources and emergency services for people with disabilities and seniors. And I am also interim director of Disability Awareness Resource Team, which is a program under HASL, which is an independent living center. How many people know about HASL? A few. And I think the director here is here today, so where are you? I can't see with all these lights in my eyes. Huh? Oh, great. And he, so maybe we can meet him later today. So what DART does is that they focus on services for victims of crime with persons with disabilities, and right now we're mainly focusing, we're out at the Gateway Center in Portland, Oregon, and we focus on people with disabilities that have been survivors of sexual assault and abuse. I also have been a member and chaired many local and state commissions, boards, and committees. And today is a great opportunity to bring people with disabilities and emergency managers to the same table to talk about gaps in the disaster planning process and how their response needs to be inclusive to everyone. Excuse me, my hands aren't working real well today. We need to be listened to and heard because of our lived experiences, and we need to be valued. And I want to give you an example of this, because I think, again, the disability community thinks many times that people with disabilities are not valued. And it is very, very important. And I think, again, this is a great opportunity, and I am so excited that the state actually is now really believing in people with disabilities and how they can participate and be actively involved. I used to be the coordinator of the Disability Project for the City of Multnomah County, City of Portland and Multnomah County. And what my responsibilities was to work with the community and the government agencies in regards to implementation of the ADA. And so one of the responsibilities I had was to work with architects who would come in, and I would have to review their plans, and then if they wanted to do a waiver, I would have to recommend whether that waiver for access would be approved or not approved. And many times I talked with architects, and I talked to them on the phone, and I let them go through their little spiel, and I would tell them I wanted to hear why they were not going to be accessible, and then I would kind of say why they needed to be accessible. And then at the end, I decided I'm going to tell them before they meet me that I'm in a wheelchair. And I did. And you could not believe the tone of voice and how it changed. And then when I met them to actually sign off, because they really knew that I knew what I was talking about because I lived it. The other example I want to give you is about a person who was a very, I call big wheel, in the city of Portland, and he was in a terrible, terrible car accident. And we fought and fought when he had not, and out of that car accident, he became paralyzed. And he was actually a quad, paralyzed from the neck down. And we fought and fought over access to housing. And again, that was under the Fair Housing Act. And when he was paralyzed, I was one of the first people to be called into the hospital to talk to him. And he told me he will never forget the things that I was talking about, and he became one of our greatest advocates. Again, he had never experienced it, and he could not believe it, but when it happened to him, he really understood it. I am very excited about this initiative, and if you've read the report or you have it in your packet, you will read it. One of that is to form an advisory committee, council, I believe, made up of persons with disability as well as an emergency management team. And I think it is very important that we make sure that that advisory committee be cross-disability and that it be a majority of people with disabilities. I think this is just a beginning for us to put our input into closing the gaps for people with disabilities in receiving emergency services. The needs of persons with disabilities are different in rural areas than in the urban areas. We need to move forward quickly in closing the gaps and see positive changes. Because the longer we wait, people with disabilities may not be receiving these emergency services that are so needed, and they need to be equitable. Remember, nothing about us without us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you for having me and including the Oregon Office of Emergency Management. My name is Andrew Phelps, and I work for the Oregon Office of Emergency Management. I'm absolutely thrilled and overjoyed and excited that we're having this conversation here today, and that emergency managers from all levels of government are included in this conversation. But at the same time, I'm a little disappointed that this is the first time we've had a gathering like this. We do a lot of planning in Oregon for Cascadia subduction zone earthquakes, for wildfires, for Oregonians, but we don't always do planning with Oregonians. I'm confident that today is a start of an effort in which we're doing planning for people with disabilities and access needs with people with access and disabilities. This is a commitment I think that the Office of Emergency Management is making. This is a commitment that the emergency management community in Oregon is making. And you've got my commitment that we won't take a step backwards. This is the way we're going to plan for Oregonians and with Oregonians. We're not going to plan for what's easy. We're going to plan for what we need to be planning for, which is ensuring every Oregonian has access to emergency information, shelter, evacuation capabilities, and that we all have the same chance to be disaster survivors, regardless of where we are in Oregon and what abilities or capabilities we have. Thank you so much for including OEM in my office, and look forward to hearing the discussion today. Different flavor microphones.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. My name is Akiko Saito, and I am the Director of Emergency Operations for the Oregon Health Authority Public Health Division. And the program that our team developed and works on is the Health Security Preparedness and Response Program. And so Kristen Darmody, is she still here? There she is over there. She's our health equity planner, and I'd like to give a special thank you to Kristen for all of her incredible work throughout this process. Stan and his incredible team, especially a big thank you to Anna for her leadership. But I will tell you from the very beginning that Kristen and Anna were really thinking about how do we do this inclusive approach from the very beginning when they started the planning session for this incredible event. So I wanted to not just say thank you to them, but also thank you to everybody in the room and everybody who is on with us streaming, because it really takes a group effort. I love that these microphones are different colors because I think one of the things that is so important is the rich discussion that we can have together, the rich planning that we can have together because we have diverse thoughts and because we have diverse experiences. So one of the things that we have done, the Oregon Health Authority, through emergency management and preparedness, we actually are the health and medical response team. So anything that is health and medical related, which as everybody here can attest to is pretty much every emergency, has some kind of health and medical approach or aspect to it. So our team, what we do at the Oregon Health Authority is we run all of the health and medical. So it has been really such an honor to be part of this particular event and understand that this is something that we have put forward. We really want to make sure that when we do our emergency preparedness and response that we are inclusive, not just with our typical partners that we work with, but with all of our partners, our local public health authorities, our tribes, our healthcare partners, and this is such an incredible event that we're going to be able to not just have this as a pull-out group, but really have this as our approach for the future. So thank you for being here. Also thank you to all the volunteers. I know a lot of people from our office and from Stan's office have actually volunteered today. So really this is such an energizing event, and I'm really happy to be here, and we're really happy to put this effort together with you and with Office of Emergency Management, with Dan's group. This is an incredible event. So thank you for being here.
My name is Stan Thomas. I work for DHS and OHA, but when it comes to emergency management, our work is specifically out of DHS. I'm the administrator of the Occupational Health, Safety, and Emergency Management Program out of DHS, and we manage and are responsible for what we call mass care. So if you survive a disaster, which we hope everybody does, and you don't need medical assistance through a KICO's group, we work with the Red Cross, Salvation Army, other state agencies, the VOADs, volunteers, to make sure that we are able to sustain life and start getting the community back on the road to normal. So it's a pretty large task. I've only got a few people that help me out. Michelle Patton is one of them, and Anna Feigum, of course, is one of them, who's done an outstanding job along with Kristen. I'm going to speak here in a few minutes, and I'll probably reiterate this. But when I took this job in 2014, this day was one of the things that I dreamed of. I asked that we get this started, along with OEM and Oregon Health Authority Public Health. And what I envisioned was not this. This is 10 times better. So I am so grateful that everybody's here, everybody that invested their time and energy to make this happen today. I also want to thank Akiko, because financially, I don't think all of this would have been possible if Oregon Health Authority did not step in and provide financing for this. So big shout out to Akiko and her team. So thank you for being here. I think we are out of time for this segment. I hope the day is fruitful for everyone. Enjoy the time, get to know your neighbors, and we look forward to learning today. Thanks. So move stage right. Huh? All right. So you know who I am. I've got to take my glasses off, and I may apologize to Vance Taylor from California. While he's speaking, I tend to leave my glasses laying around. I apologize if I leave them up here and I sneak up here while you're talking. So we've done a lot of recognition already, but again, the team, Anna, Kristen, Emily, Shelley, so many people have come together to make this day possible. I'm going to start off by saying that typically I don't use notes. In fact, the only place I ever use notes is typically when I have to sit in front of the legislature. This is more important than that, so I'm going to use notes. I have a lot to say, and I have a short time to do it, but this is really important to me. So the section that we're on today is titled, How We Got Here and Where We Hope to Go. And I'm not here to tell anyone how we got here. We've all had our own journeys to get us here today. And I am certainly not going to tell anyone where to go. I have a lot of people tell me where to go frequently, but that's another conference. So we did all have our own journeys that led us here today. Some of those journeys were much more difficult than others. Each of our stories stand alone, but collectively, our stories stand together today in this room. We've experienced successes, and we've experienced challenges, and we've experienced failures, some of us more than others. I began this work taking on the mass care role on April 14th, 2014. And on April 15th, this is what I wanted to see. This was one of our biggest planning gaps for mass care. This was one of our biggest planning gaps for health and medical. This was one of our biggest planning gaps for disasters in Oregon. So I am excited. I am happy to see you all here. For everyone that gave all in their past, thank you. Thank you for everything that you've done in the past. Thank you for the challenges that you faced. If it wasn't for the lessons that you learned yesterday, we wouldn't be here today. And in large part, the lessons learned from our past are the cornerstone of where we start today. So I want everybody to just think about that for a few minutes and understand that we are moving on a journey together, and it's going to be a good journey. A brick wall doesn't fall down with one hit. It has to be confronted several times. Eventually it'll weaken and a breakthrough begins, and that's what I want for today. I want the breakthrough to begin today. I, and especially we, the three agencies that have talked, the state agencies that have talked, and along with Jan and who she represents, we can't do this alone. You hold the knowledge, you hold the experience, and you hold the keys to future success. I'm not checking a box today. If you read Nyla's report, it's called not checking a box. I am not checking a box today. I am challenging everyone in this room to make Oregon more resilient, more inclusive, and more prepared to meet the needs of not some of us, but all of us. So with that, I'd like to ask for some grace from everybody in this room. It's not often we get together and join together in a room like this, and this is actually probably one of the first times. I want the room to be a safe space today, a safe space to speak, to share, and to learn. Some of our thoughts might be clunky, disjointed, and somewhat confusing to others. Listen to the heart of the message of concern. See through your experience and find the meaning in others, even when it doesn't make sense. Just listen. Know we're here for the same cause and for the same goals and for the same successes. The road ahead as we move forward in Oregon isn't always going to be smooth. There'll be hills, there'll be valleys, there'll be rock slides, there'll be wildlife crossings. I believe Nyla, where's Nyla, can attest to this in the last year. Her work has been amazing. She and the planning team have overcome so many things to get us here today. We have prepared, planned, discussed, and cussed all along the way. But even in our differences, we held on to the common goal. So thank you for everyone here today. I dreamed of this. I mentioned it a few minutes earlier on April 15th, 2014. And what I dreamed of wasn't this big. So I appreciate you being here. Live, laugh, learn with your new friends, and let's move Oregon to a better place for not only the disability community, but for everyone involved. Thanks. I got my glasses, Vance. So I have the honor and pleasure of introducing our next speaker, who's Vance Taylor. He comes to us from California. His title is rather long. His bio is in the booklet, and I encourage you to read it. My experience with Vance happened in November and December of last year. I was asked to go down through EMAC to help the state of California with their sheltering task force. And one of the things that I experienced and what was amazing to me was the challenges of the Camp Fire and the challenges that Paradise and Butte County faced, and how shelters were moved all over the area into multiple counties. But one of the things that struck me is when Vance came into the room. He was laser focused on the disability community. He was laser focused on people with access and functional needs. He was laser focused on all populations. And he commanded the room and made sure that everyone and everything was taken care of. And it was an honor for me to be able to witness that, work with Vance. He took time out of his day. I sat in his office for an afternoon and just had an opportunity to talk with him. So Vance, please come on up. He is our keynote speaker today. His experiences are amazing. What he has to share is amazing. And thank you, Vance. When I gave him a call and said, we're doing this, could you please come up? I didn't even get the invitation out before he said absolutely. So welcome, Vance Taylor. Thank you.
It's a good mic. Usually I have a very soft voice, so everywhere I travel, I want to have a microphone. I'm not the guy you want at a football game. The team will not hear me cheer. It works out good for my kids, though, because I've never yelled at them. So that's working for me. Stan, team, thank you very much for asking me to be here. It really is a privilege to be here on what really is a breakthrough day. So I just want you to understand how grateful I am to be able to see what you're doing and to have a small role in this. But I'll absolutely take this back to California with me. My name's Vance Taylor. I have a very long title, I will warn you now. I'm the Chief of the Office of Access and Functional Needs at the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. Yikes. I was told somewhere along the way that a long title in state government was a good thing. If that's true, I'm winning. It cost me a fortune to print my cards. I've got them in Braille as well, which is a lot of dots. Now, I don't read Braille, so I asked my friend Joe Xavier to read it for me. Joe's blind and said he'd do so. Because, I didn't know what it said, right? This is a bunch of dots. It could be like, hey, for a good time, call this guy, right? So I gave it to Joe, and Joe's like, well, I got good news and bad news. Good news, it says what it's supposed to say. What's the bad news? I have a callus on my thumb. So like, all right. So if you get one of my cards later and you're blind, my apologies. It was interesting. I was looking at who's in the room and kind of reading down the roster, and it's a really good mix, and that's important. But it reminds me, actually, of a few years ago. Just a little background on my family. We like to bake, and by we, I mean my wife bakes, and I like to eat what she bakes. It's the way it works. And my daughters were like, hey, we want to bake too. So my wife gave them a recipe for brownies, and she put all the ingredients out on the counter. Now, if you just grew up eating brownies, it kind of trips you out when you see all these individual ingredients, right? Like, how do these things come together to make brownies? And in terms of recipes, kids don't always go line by line. And sometimes it says like an egg, but it's fun to break eggs, so they put like 3. Salt, flour, a dash, a pinch, whatever, right? It's all good. So they mix it up, and they bake it up, and what came out did not look like or smell like brownies. Now as dad, I've got like this sacred responsibility to try whatever they bake, right? So they're like, hey, take a bite. And I was like, I got an idea. Why don't you take a bite and then describe the taste to me? And they did. And the look on their face told me what it tasted like. My wife, seeing a teachable moment, said, why don't you try it again? But this time, let's include all the ingredients in the way that they're supposed to come together. The right proportion, the right process. And they did. And what they baked up looked like and smelled like brownies. And I was happy to take the first, second, and third bites of what came out. And so as I look at this group, I think of brownies. Because here you've got folks from public health. You've got folks from the disability community. You've got folks from emergency management. We have policy people. We've got first responders. We've got people from different walks of life, all who intersect in this life-saving area, all who have come together to essentially bake up something more inclusive and integrative and life-saving. Bless you. And that's what it's all about, because integration is key. It is essential. It really is everything. We saw this in California as people witnessed Hurricane Katrina. And Katrina put a national spotlight on this. We saw that out of everyone who died, 70% of those who perished had an access or functional need. What does that say about the way, historically, that we as a nation have planned for, prepared, responded, and recovered with access and functional needs in mind. And what's more is we saw that it wasn't just in these large-scale disasters. We learned that regardless of what the disaster was, fire, flood, earthquake, where it took place, duration and intensity, that there was always one commonality. And it's that people with disabilities and those with access and functional needs are always disproportionately impacted. And so I tell communities that if you're going to understand what these needs are, and if you're going to integrate what those needs are within your plans, you've got to start with the right people around the table. Now in California, the governor leaned forward, created the Office of Access and Functional Needs, created the position of chief, and made it the senior executive position. And so I go up and down the state. We've got 58 counties. I hit 54 of the 58 just last year. I spent a lot of time on the road, preaching, teaching, and evangelizing this message. And there are some counties, and let me say this, they're all good people wanting to do good things, but they're not always empowered to do so. And so you've got some counties that want to do the right thing, but they're not quite sure what that is. And because they're so afraid to do the wrong thing, they do nothing, which of course is the worst thing we can do. I talk about how when you've got your disability stakeholders around the table with you, you come out with a better plan. It's a better product that leads to a better outcome. You move away from things like, your plan didn't include us, and move into our plan should address the following, right? So you get buy-in, and it's partnership. And that partnership is what makes for success. I was sworn in on August 3rd, 2015. And an hour later, we activated for a fire. Then I was like, I didn't do it. My predecessor had retired. He was in Southern California. You can imagine I had some questions. So I'd call, and Richard was like, hey, I'm at the beach, or just got back from the beach, or I'm on my way to the beach. I was like, man, I got to retire. He said, I'm going to come out there and we'll go through all these things. Just give me 2 weeks. And a week later, I got a phone call that Richard had passed away, which was a blow to the community. But also, you had to think all the institutional knowledge was now gone. And a week after that, my phone rang on an early Sunday morning, and I was told that fires exploded in Lake County. Lake County is very rural. It's the most economically depressed county in the state of California. And I get briefed up at the State Operations Center. A few hours later, I'm driving into the county. And as I'm driving in, I'm seeing every car go that way. And I'm going this way. And it caused me to question my life choices. It was like a bomb had gone off in that area. Smoke was billowing in through the van, burning my lungs. I got to the shelter. Cars, trucks, every vehicle of every make and model you can think of was parked in every way but the right way. There was a truck parked sideways taking up 4 placard spots. Donations were dropped off in front of the curb cuts, meaning in order to access the shelter, we had to drive my van up onto the curb to get in. When I got in, bathrooms were accessible-ish. We know what that's like. Aisles were cluttered. Cots were too close together, making my wheelchair difficult to navigate through the shelter area. The whole time, the shelter manager kept saying, wait till you see our saving grace. We've got these built-in accessible showers. There's lots of them. They can meet a high demand. Then I said, take me to these showers. And he said, they're right through this door. And I asked, is that the only way in and out? And he said, yeah, why? Well, it was a set of double doors divided down the middle with an iron bar that made each individual doorway too narrow for my chair to pass. And I could tell he hadn't worked with people who have disabilities because he says, well, what if I just push your chair really hard? I was like, I don't know, you're gonna break my chair? What do you? I will not fit through that doorway. And he says, but if you can't make it through, neither can anyone else in a wheelchair. And I said, now you're getting it. In a county that's more than 2 times the state average for older population and people with disabilities, this was the reality we were dealing with. That in the rush to open the shelter for the community, steps were skipped or overlooked. Again, good people wanting to do good things, but maybe not quite empowered to do so. So I called the State Operations Center. I said, hey, California is the 5th largest economy in the world. We have 40 million people in the state. How many portable, accessible showers do we have immediate access to? And they said 5. And I thought they meant 500. So I was excited. I was like, all right, 500. I was gonna make the Oprah Winfrey of showers. You get a shower, you get a shower. We all get showers. And they're like, no, 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 we mean like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I thought, well, that's a lot less cool. And they were all being used at a concert in Southern California, which is total junk because nobody showers at Burning Man. So we dropped the G word, governor, and we commandeered the showers. As a side note, let me just say this. If you ever get the chance to commandeer something, do it. It's amazing, but it goes to your head pretty quick. I got home and I was like, I commandeer the remote, and I commandeer the salt shaker. My kids got sick of it pretty quick. So we get these showers, and they're procured and deployed and installed, and it's 4 days. Now for government, that is breakneck speed. But for the people who needed those showers, 4 days was an eternity. I remember thanking one of my colleagues who'd worked particularly hard on this. I said, Tim, thank you for all your work. And he said, hey, no problem, it's still my job. And I appreciated that, right? I appreciated that Tim didn't see this as extra or something special. It's just a part of what we do. I also didn't get the sense that he understood the impact of what we'd done. I said, Tim, let me tell you what I saw at the shelter that day. I saw people on the worst day of their lives. People who were homeless for the first time through no fault of their own. It was hot and muggy, and we were covered in sweat, and there's ash the size of snowflakes everywhere. And ash sticks to sweat. It forms a grime that covers your body. I talked to a lady who told me what it was like to evacuate so quickly that her neighbor came, picked her up out of her chair, laid her in the bed of the pickup truck, and drove off. And she described watching her house burn down with her wheelchair inside. And then I had to explain to her and the other people who needed those showers that because we hadn't integrated their needs, because we hadn't been inclusive in our planning, that they had no choice but to sit in their filth and watch as their non-disabled counterparts hopped in and out of those showers to refresh themselves until we could figure something out. So can you imagine for 1 minute, I said, what it must have been like for those individuals when the showers finally came, when 4 days later they could refresh themselves. What it must have been like when those cool droplets of water washed them clean. The gentleman told me, I felt like me again. Halfway through the shower, I realized it's going to be okay. We can get through this. That's hope, right? It broke my heart that he had to wait 4 days to feel that hope. So that experience changed me. And it changed my colleagues. It changed our agency. It changed the way that we as a state approach the integration of access and functional needs. And so we have gone, as I said, to every county. Now, 3 years later, after sending this message, after providing technical assistance, after deploying to disaster after disaster after disaster, 3 years, almost to the day after that, I get another call, fires in Lake County. And I go out to the same exact shelter. The smoke was in the van, eyes were burning, sore throat. And all I'm thinking is, what in the heck am I going to see when I go there? Because if I get there and it's the same, then what have we been doing for the last 3 years? So we pull up, and there's 2 people at the entrance, and they're telling people where to go to park. Oh, placard, come this way. And they've got a whole row of designated placard parking. They had to add extra ones with orange cones. Curb cuts were exposed. I pulled up, didn't have to get on the curb. The aisles were clear. Cots were spaced out. Bathrooms were in fact accessible. And that set of double doors with the iron bar in the middle, they had physically removed the bar. Our disability stakeholders had not just been informed about the disaster, they were on site. They teamed up with our functional assessment service teams to go cot by cot, asking individuals if they had unmet needs. Our independent living centers were providing durable medical equipment. Specialized dietary considerations were being met. And we had ASL interpreters on site. And just in case, we had 2 portable accessible showers right there on site ready to go. And they were there because we had approved that expense prior to receiving an emergency declaration. So we had grown. And my thought is this: if that can happen in the most economically depressed county in the state, what can we do in the rest of the state? You see, it's not about the resources, right? It's not about which county has money, which county doesn't. It's about an internal commitment to integration that results in an external effort to bring the right people around the table to engage in this effort in partnership. The strength of my office is not that the word governor is included in my title. The strength of my office is in the partnerships we have. So I look at this group and I think of that, and it makes me feel every confidence that Oregon is well on its way. Now, in the last 3.5 years, I've activated for 15 of the state's 20 worst disasters. What does that say about what's happened in the last 3.5 years? These disasters are happening more and more regularly. And not only are they increasing in number, but the severity, scope, and scale of these disasters is increasing as well. And so we have to have an integrated cycle or we won't make it. Now, in deploying to all those disasters, there's been a few key things I've picked up. One is on the communication side. Okay, let me tell you, we had fires in one county, middle of the night, spreading quick, and they didn't know, should we push out a wireless emergency alert notification? Now the WIA alert, because we gotta use the acronym, right? It's emergency management, you gotta have an acronym. WIA is like an Amber Alert for your phone. And there was some back and forth, do we use it or don't we? And the county didn't want to cause a mass panic because it would go to some people who weren't affected. They didn't want to congest the evacuation routes. Ultimately, they opted to not use it. My problem with that, as I explained to the county later, and unfortunately they learned the hard way, was that nowhere in that consideration did they think about the impact that not sending an alert would have on people with access and functional needs, particularly on the deaf members of that community. Because if you're deaf, you keep your phone with you at night. It's under your pillow, or it's in your pocket, it's somewhere close. So that if an emergency comes through, your phone vibrates and wakes you up. But the alert didn't go through. So their phones didn't vibrate. And so they slept as fires raged around them. And as a result, some perished and others suffered. I had a friend in that impact area who was notified through family, who texted him. He got in his car, he drove to the Home Depot parking lot. It's 3 in the morning. He says the Home Depot parking lot was totally full. And he says you could see the glow of everybody's smartphone on their faces. He says all of a sudden, every car turns on. They all pull out at the same time. And I'm left alone in the Home Depot parking lot, wondering what in the world has happened. And I look at my phone and I'm seeing this press conference that I'm streaming, and I realize that they told everyone where to go for safety. The problem is, it's not captioned and there's no interpreter. So I didn't know where to go. So I didn't know what they were saying. So I asked him, well, how'd you get out? He says, I relied on texts from family and friends. I got turned around 3 different times before I made it to safety. So on the communication front, I cannot emphasize enough. We have to consider access and functional needs and how we communicate. We've got to have interpreters. We've got to use captioning. We've got to have a recognition that not everybody receives information the same way. Now, we've also learned a lot on the transportation front. People rely on evacuation to get out. Not everybody has a specialized or accessible vehicle. And some people are transportation disadvantaged. Right? They don't have a car. Paratransit takes at least 24-hour notice, which doesn't do me very much during a disaster. We had a disaster, always seems like in the middle of the night. This one was at 2 in the morning. The county had done all the right things. They had all these plans in place that they were going to use local paratransit. That's how they're going to get people with disabilities out. There was one problem. They had never exercised the plan. And so when they pulled the trigger on it, they realized there was one dot they had forgot to connect. The county included the paratransit providers, but never told the paratransit providers that they were part of their plan. So when the evacuation notice went through, where did all the drivers go? They left, leaving a fleet of accessible vehicles with no one there to operate. So set up some MOUs, talk to your partners, and exercise your plans. Or when you have to move people, the resources just aren't going to be there. On the sheltering front, let me tell you what I've learned. Red Cross, whom I've got a lot of love for, is not perfect. Shh, don't tell them. Is Red Cross in the room? There he is. Get him. No. So Red Cross is supposed to assess every single facility that could be used as a shelter. Then they put it in their national shelter system. But it's a lot of facilities, and so if you look at those facilities, some are outdated. And some of those assessments need to be redone. Some of them are incomplete. So every community should look at what they've got in NSS and reassess those systems. Every single one. I went to a shelter, the most overcrowded shelter I've ever been to. People were almost literally sleeping on top of each other. I went to a shelter in the same town right after that. Big, huge high school, beautiful gymnasium. Space for days. So I asked, why isn't everyone at the high school? They said, well, because we opened the elementary school first. Why did you open the elementary school? You know what they said? That's where we always go. Right? We do things out of habit. We do things out of routine. We need to look at those assessments. You want to know how close the elementary school was to the high school? 3 blocks. I did it in my wheelchair. Right? None of these things are hard, per se. None of these things are rocket science. We're not cracking the Da Vinci Code. But they all make a difference. Every last one of them makes a difference. Let me tell you just a story or two in closing. I always think of this when I look at an audience like this. We've got 2 kids. My wife was in labor with our first one. It was 24-hour labor. I didn't even know that was possible. Right? I grew up watching like George Clooney on ER. He knocked him out in an hour. Right? Plus commercials. So 23 hours later, I was like, what in the world? So when we had the second one, my wife was like, never again, right? She wanted to wait till the very end to go to the hospital. I thought that was a terrible idea. But she's like, my body, my choice. Okay. So contractions are 10 minutes apart. Should we go? No, we're waiting. 7 minutes, we're waiting. 5 minutes, we're waiting. At 3 minutes, she turns to me and says, we gotta go right now. I was like, ah. So we get in the van, and we would have been fine, but it's downtown traffic at 8 in the morning on a Wednesday. It would have been faster for me to put her on my lap and drive in my wheelchair to the hospital. So she turns to me and says, I'm gonna have this baby in the van. And I thought, I don't want to be that guy. Look, we all know who this guy is. We've seen him on the news. He's like, well, my instincts took over. I grabbed a shoelace and we made it happen. I'm not built that way. I looked over, there was a squad car. And I thought, perfect. We'll pull up, roll the window down. And we did, and I articulated in a really, really great manner exactly what was going on, why we needed help. My argument went something like this. Help! I think that was it, yeah. Yeah, that was it. And the guy says, oh, would you like a police escort? I said, yeah. And he said, and I quote, we don't really do that. And he rolled his window up. My wife looks at me, and she's crying. And I start to get emotional. Now I think what happened, I'm not sure, I think what happened is that the desperation that we felt as our hearts collectively sank oozed out of our van and into the squad car. Because a few minutes later, he rolled his window back down and said, all right, I'm gonna turn the lights on, stay on my bumper. We'll get you there. And the next thing I knew, we're bombing our way through downtown traffic. Which, as a side note, let me just say, if you ever get the chance to get a police escort, do it. It's amazing. It was exhilarating. I was like, thank you so much for this opportunity. My wife did not seem as excited as I was at the time. So we pull up to the hospital and he takes off. I don't know his name. I didn't get to shake his hand. I never got to say thank you. He took off. We went to the hospital. 15 minutes later, our daughter's born. Now I look at this sweet girl, this Miss Angel, who I brought with me today. Wave to the crowd, Sandy. There it is. And I cannot help but wonder, what tale would I tell if it had not been for the right person at the right time in the exact moment of our lives when we needed them most? Now here's the thing. We're talking about partnership. We're talking about integration. We're talking about historic get-togethers. The reality is this. By virtue of the fact that you are here right now, by virtue of the fact that you are engaged in this life-saving effort, you now take on the role of being the right person at the right time for the constituencies that you serve. It will be because of you that Oregonians are safe and healthy and secure during disasters. It will be because of you that there is physical and programmatic access before, during, and after disasters. It will be because of you that all Oregonians will not just be more resilient, not just survive, but that they will survive with dignity. That is your role. That is an awesome responsibility. And it is a privilege. And it won't stay within the walls of this convention center. It will spill out throughout the state. And the impact you have will be real. So let us end with this commitment. You lift. And you lift. And you lift. And all the way from California, I will lift. And together, all Oregonians will ascend. Thank you.
All right, we have heard some wonderful things. Stan, Grace is definitely in the room, and so is Hope. I loved that. And Vance, thank you for sharing those stories. I think that illustrates things to us in a way that nothing else could do. We have a panel coming forward now, and so they're going to join us on the stage. One of the big issues that was identified across the state as I traveled was the fact that so few people in the state really understand what emergency services are and what they do. We've all heard about it, we all know about it, but people were very confused and they wanted to know. Another thing that was quite interesting was that everywhere I traveled, people identified a huge fear of shootings, chemical warfare, and man-made disasters, even more than they did natural disasters. And so I think emergency services are shifting and being required to do things such as when we had to respond to the tragic shooting in Roseburg not long ago. So I put my glasses on because when I was starting, I couldn't really see names, but I'm gonna ask our panelists to come up here now. And I'm going to moderate. They're going to tell you each person has 4 minutes. So we've got Stan's coming first. I don't know the order. When there's yeah, they created a new order. It's evolving, just like we said. Things are evolving. It's evolving in a very empowered way. I think we're going to have to move some chairs up. And each of these people is going to spend 4 minutes, and they're going to describe from the national overview level the role of FEMA and kind of emergency management services down through the state level down through the county level, and then into the local level. And after they've had a chance to sort of describe that, which I think is very important information for all of us, you will get a chance to ask questions, do some clarification. Thank you for that. And maybe I'll sit in the middle just so that I can fill this space, and we'll share a mic. Is there room there? Okay, thanks. I can't really see the order of people, but so again, as we evolve and as things happen and things are going in its own different way, I believe Danielle Bailey is going to speak first, and so since they're sitting in an interesting configuration, I'm going to let them figure out what goes next and who gets the mic next, and I'll hold this for the moderation afterwards.
Hi, this is Danielle Bailey with Fema, Federal Emergency Management Agency. I'm a regional disability integration specialist. So regional for Region 10 is Oregon, Alaska, Idaho, and Washington. And so you want us to talk about first kind of what our role is. So my role within Fema is kind of twofold. Primarily, I work within region. So to do education, review planning, and to work with staff within Region 10 about disability access. So looking at the physical, programmatic, and effective communication pieces and how we include those into our plan. Also, in a steady state, I get to go out into the community and work with a number of disability stakeholders and help to form and develop disability stakeholder groups at the state level. So this is something that's very exciting to see happen here. And then the other piece is I'm deployed a lot. And oftentimes I'm deployed outside of the region, typically in Region 10, knock on wood, we don't have a lot of disasters at the federal level that impact populations. We do have a number of disasters in the Region 10 level that affect maybe facilities, roads, structures, and there's a lot of access piece in there that we don't typically talk about. But as far as FEMA, we're kind of the last ones to show up at the game. So it typically starts local, state, and then federal after a presidential declaration.
Thank you. That's great. Matt Marhain, did I get your name right?
Close.
Close.
It's
Okay.
Marhain. Yes.
Marhain, thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Matt Marhain. I'm the Deputy Director for Oregon Office of Emergency Management. Of course, I get to follow the very talented Andrew Phelps, and I get to support him in our role in building and establishing relationships and programs and capabilities to deal with the emergency management structure. I have been with the organization for just over 19 years. Have managed to escape the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Not that we don't most certainly work well together, but it's a different perspective, and I worked for them for about 9 years dealing with human services programs. And what my experience has told me from that event, as well as my experience here in the state of Oregon, is that it's going to take all of us to lift the capabilities of all of our state partners to make a difference. Now, what I specifically do for Oregon Office of Emergency Management is I manage the day-to-day operations of all of our staff that facilitate emergency response operations, preparedness, response programs, recovery programs, mitigation, and we also manage the state 911's program. The full purpose of the Office of Emergency Management is truly to coordinate and communicate with our partners to effectively manage all of the responsibility and capabilities, subject matter experts, and resources that we have statewide to make them effective in meeting the needs of our customers and our constituents within the state of Oregon. And that means working with all of the state agencies, but most certainly 33 of them that are identified in our Oregon revised statutes, 33 agencies that are specifically responsible for establishing functionality, capability, and resources to respond to all disasters that impact the state of Oregon. And that's one of the largest challenges that we focus on day to day, which is to make sure that we are assessing the impact and risk of the state to particular events in the state of Oregon and ensuring that we are working together to figure out how to best organize our response and to be as effective as possible in saving life, protecting the environment, and saving property. and most certainly implementing the governor's authority and managing all of our resources to do just that, not just for state organizations, but to support our county partners and our local tribal and other communities throughout the state of Oregon.
Thank you, Matt. We're now going to hear from Stan to talk a little bit about what his level does and how it interfaces with what has come before and after.
Thank you, Nyla. And I've moved on from the lemon microphone to the orange microphone, so I'm getting my vitamin C today. So my name is Stan Thomas. To carry on from what Matt was talking about, the state of Oregon is broke down for disaster response operations into 18 emergency support functions. And many of those support functions are assigned to different agencies to carry out. For the Department of Human Services, we're assigned Emergency Support Function 6, Mass Care, and Emergency Support Function 11, Food and Water. So if you hear of a disaster to where we need shelter, Mass Care is sheltering emergency needs. And when I talk about emergency needs, I call that the teddy bears and toilet paper. It's all those things that you forgot to pack in your go bag that you probably need if you've been displaced. So some first aid, medications. We work closely with Akiko and her group as far as providing medications and some limited medical services and shelter operations. So it's really taking care of the overall population. With that, a couple examples, one example that kind of comes to mind recently was the snowstorms in February. And how many people heard about the Amtrak train that was stuck out in the wilderness with 183 people on board? We got the call. We worked with Amtrak, and I kind of joke around about how we really don't do anything at all. We find the people that can do something. We were notified by Oregon Emergency Management that there were some concerns and some issues of trying to get the train out of the woods and back up to Eugene or into Eugene. And we coordinated with the Red Cross and the Oregon Food Bank and some of our other partners to make sure that when the 183 people rolled into Eugene, they could get off of that train, have some snacks, have some food, water, and information because they had been through a grueling 3 days lost out in the wilderness on this train. So we do that from a couple little tiny rooms in the Human Services building downtown. Again, we're a small group, but we partner with many, many other organizations. Our primary partners, and one of them you'll hear from, Chad Carter with the American Red Cross and the Oregon Food Bank. We really don't take a step forward or a step backwards or a step anywhere without them by our side. So that's kind of the role of the Department of Human Services in disaster response operations. Again, closely with our federal partners. Danielle has been wonderful to work with over the years. We also, if we moved into a declared disaster at the federal level, something that was signed off by the president, we engage in our mass care partners in FEMA Region 10. And we work on a regular basis with them in making sure that our plans and our operations coincide with what the FEMA operations do. I try to explain to my father, who's back in Illinois and doesn't quite get the whole system. I just basically say, Dad, the ESF structure is kind of the FEMA of Oregon in the way we're spread out, if that's an easier way to explain it. So that's what we do, and I think I'll pass it on to Akiko.
So Akiko Saito is going to describe what the Oregon Health Authority's role is in the emergency management system to balance the DHS role that we just heard Stan talk about.
Great, thank you. Again, I'm Akiko Saito. I'm the Director of Emergency Operations with the Oregon Health Authority Public Health Division. But specifically, I run an incredible team, and together we are the Health Security Preparedness and Response. So we take care of all of the ESF 8, which is health and medical, for any emergency in the state of Oregon, as well as we support our other 49 states and our other territories. If we do have a disaster somewhere else, we actually can go and support them. One of the things that we do, and as I mentioned in my earlier comments, is public health really is so broad and covers so many things, from when you get up in the morning and you brush your teeth, and we work with all of our dental facilities, we regulate those and assist with them. We do all the drinking water systems. So recently, last year, we had the Salem water crisis, and we were front and center with that. We also have, if you go to a restaurant and eat, that's what public health does. We inspect restaurants to make sure that the food that you're eating is safe. So we have a myriad of things that we do in the public health division, and so therefore many of our emergencies here in Oregon end up having the Oregon Health Authority Public Health Division in a supporting role. We really focus on resiliency and health equity. Anything that we do around our emergency response and planning, as well as recovery, really has to have that focus, the health equity focus, and really about resiliency. So our program actually runs in AmeriCorps Vista, and I know I saw an AmeriCorps Vista here earlier. There she is. Oh, and another one in the back. We run an AmeriCorps Vista program which really focuses on the elimination of poverty, and so we have about 40 plus AmeriCorps Vista members throughout the state and with one of our Oregon tribes to ensure that we can build out local resiliency. And we also have liaisons that live out in the field. They live and work with their communities and really understand that every emergency is local. With those liaisons, we also have a tribal liaison, and we work very closely with Tracy at his tribe, as well as the total 9 tribes in Oregon, and they have a formalized tribal preparedness coalition. So we're really focused on working with our other partners to ensure that our local communities and our tribal communities are resilient. And in addition to that, we also work with all the 64 hospitals and ensure that hospitals, if they have any kind of mass casualty event or if they are needing any support, that we are there for them, as well as our EMS providers. And finally, we work on trainings for the community. We do a lot of behavioral health training because behavioral health is also with the Oregon Health Authority, and in any behavioral health response, we would be there front and center. So we look at all of the different plans, our pediatric surge plan, our burn plan, our radiation plan, our chemical plan, those all fall in the Oregon Health Authority Public Health Division. So at the end of the day, our team is really small, but if you think about the footprint that public health has, it's fairly overwhelming, and that's why we look to having all of our partners with us, because we can't do this alone. We need to do this all together.
Excellent. Now, Akiko alluded to working with the tribes. People in Indian country have unique challenges in emergency situations, and Tracy's going to talk a bit about tribal response and how they fit into this whole picture.
Thanks, Nyla. Good morning. My name is Tracy Depew. I'm Director of Emergency Management for the Cow Creek Band of the Umpqua Tribe of Indians. We're one of 9 tribes in the state of Oregon. Our government office is located in Roseburg. Our ancestral territory encompasses a good portion of southern Oregon. And thank you for being here today. Are there any tribal members here today, or tribal elders? Welcome. And greetings from the Cow Creek tribe. I was struck this morning, actually I've been struck a lot, but as I wrote my comments, a lot of what I'm going to say was reflected already by several people that have already spoken. Andrew's comments rang very clearly with me. Andrew Phelps from OEM. I'm going to be real transparent with you. So my background is about 15 years in emergency management in the state of Oregon, primarily in healthcare up until the last 3 years when I joined the tribe as the Director of Emergency Management and began building that program. So I have to tell you that we're 15 years behind in this effort. And while I'm not going to make excuses and I'm going to reserve apologies, there was a lot of work that had to be accomplished in the emergency management arena post 9/11, post Katrina, post Sandy, post some of the disasters that we never, and implications that we never thought we'd see. But we're behind, but we can do this. And I want to come back to a message of hope. It struck me this morning that I've had the good fortune of working for Stan's agency, the Department of Human Services, in a previous role. I've worked for Akiko's agency in a previous role. And I've had the very good fortune of working with folks like Ed Flick and other members of the emergency management community. I'll tell you, at the end of the day, don't focus on the agency, focus on the people. We have good people doing good work. Are the agencies the avenue by which to get to the end state and to get to success? Yes, but it's the people in those agencies that are going to make that happen. As a message of hope, and I'm going to try and be concise here, and I'm not very good at being concise and short and to the point, so whoever rings the bell, please ring it loudly. The Cow Creek tribe is a reservationless tribe, or had been until 2018, which means we did not have a defined land base where tribal members lived, which meant that our tribal membership is integrated in many communities throughout Oregon as well as the United States. So by that nature, it causes us to have to partner with the folks that you see at this table and some that are not at this table. So it was at the behest of my boss, our government operations officer, that I am here today and that I am engaged in this work, and I'm committing the resources of the Cow Creek tribe to help solve this issue. Native Americans have a story of resilience. They have been in existence for time immemorial. There's 9 tribes in the state of Oregon. There's 29 tribes in the state of Washington. And correct me if I'm wrong, my FEMA partner, but there's 271 tribes in FEMA Region 10. So I want you to think about the resilience that Indian country has expressed over in time immemorial. We can do this. This is not rocket science. We're not breaking the Da Vinci Code. I appreciate Vance's comments. We can do this. It's time, and it's here. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. I was very nervous about this work because we're late. I had the good fortune of attending a conference last week where my friend Jim House from the state of Washington spoke and met with me one-on-one. Jim is with the Washington State Council on Emergency Management Planning and works with the disability community, and I'm thankful for the time and the resources we have to the north. I'm very thankful for the resources we have to the south, and we're going to have to reach out. We're not the experts at this, but we can get it done. So again, I want to circle back around to give you an expression of hope and confidence. I think the folks that have made the commitment to this work and to help fill Stan and the state of Oregon's vision for this planning effort, I'm confident that we can do this. So just happy to be here. I'll tell you, Indian country is very complex. We have all of the same concerns and issues that ordinary city, county, and state jurisdictions have. Then you add in the element of natural resources, and you add in the element of cultural resources, and it creates a complicated environment. But if Native American community can do that, the disability community can do that in the state of Oregon. So thanks for all of your efforts, and thanks to everybody at the panel.
Right on. Thank you. So we're going to continue drilling down because our work in the afternoon, you will be doing things as individuals, but let's move to the county level now, and we'll have Justin describe what happens with them.
Good morning, everybody. I want to take a second to acknowledge everybody that's in this room and how important this work is that we're doing here today. I think Vance said it very eloquently and with a way more charming delivery than I'm able to do it, but I just want you guys to take 1 second to applaud everybody in this room to say good work for being here today. Okay, I'm having a bad hair day, so let's see how this goes. For those of you who can't see me, I'm bald, so every day is kind of a bad hair day, but okay. So I am Justin Ross with Multnomah County Office of Emergency Management. I'm the Community Capacity Specialist, and I think I may be the only one in the state of Oregon that has that title, which is kind of interesting because we get to make up our own titles sometimes, and I thought this kind of makes sense for the work that I do. And that work mirrors what the county does as a whole, and it's about building capacity across Multnomah County. In the Portland metropolitan area, we have kind of a unique setup where we receive some federal funding. So there's more than just one county that's involved in this work in our area. It's Washington County, who's represented here today, Clackamas County, Columbia County. Clackamas County has some representation here today, and then also Clark County to the north. And we all work collaboratively to come up with some solutions on how we can better prepare our communities, how we can move through a disaster, and how we can come out on the other side of the recovery and build a resilient community. So Prior to my arrival with Multnomah County Office of Emergency Management, I worked for Fema. I was a disability integration advisor. Like Danielle, I spent a lot of time out on the road. When I was out on the road, going from disaster to disaster, my work was specifically with people with disabilities. And prior to that, I worked for the Oregon Office on Disability and Health, where I was also an emergency manager, and I worked specifically with people with disabilities in that work too. I've been really blessed. I'm one of the few people that I know in the nation who's been able to spend their entire emergency management career working with the people that are in this room today. It's really nice to be here with see all the familiar faces, all my friends that are here, all the people who, unbeknownst to them when they showed up, are going to end up being my friends by the end of today. The work that we do in the county is really about the intersection of people and how they're affected by disasters. So in our region and in our county, we do a number of different things. We do a lot of planning work. We do mitigation work where we try to figure out how can we help prevent incidents from happening to people, and if they are going to happen, how we can lessen the burden that they experience from it. We also do a lot of grant funded work too, so we try to find money so we can help bring along projects like the one that we're working on today here, all of us together. We also do something that we don't talk about very often in these kind of meetings, but it's really a big piece of disaster work, and I hope that some people in this room are going to become interested in this topic, which is recovery. So I just want to take a second to say, historically during disasters, people with disabilities, people with access and functional needs, people from communities of color, people with low income are the ones that are most greatly affected by disasters. And oftentimes those intersections all come together at one time. And during a disaster, the good news is, for the most part, everybody's kind of in it together. So the divisions kind of narrow down a little bit in the early stages of a disaster. Vance eloquently talked about communication access and transportation access, and these things are harder for people with disabilities and other underserved communities in a disaster for sure. What I'm really interested in is what happens after a disaster. And this is where the cleaves in society become larger. People with disabilities, people who have low literacy, people with other barriers have a really hard time accessing resources post-disaster. These are the kind of things that can help close that gap. Us coming together now in blue skies and talking about how can we team up, how can we work towards a common goal, how can we narrow the difference between what happens to people before disaster and after disaster. This is the kind of thing that starts that. I'm really proud to be part of this today, and I want to thank all of you guys again for being here. I'm going to turn it over to, I believe, my friend Ed Flick is next.
I just want to thank you for bringing up very quickly the whole issue. He's right. We need to talk in the advisory council, which hopefully some of you will join into, come together about those very issues, not just the planning. So thank you. Ed.
Hey, thanks, and it's really great to be here and also to see a lot of great partners I've worked with over the last couple of years. My own story started here. I went to college at Western across the river, went into the Army, and got to be involved in some work in disaster response and resilience, and then when I decided to retire and come home. And coming back to the community after being away for 25 years, the first thing that struck me is how much, Marion County's changed. It's much more diverse now. It is a complicated place, and one of the things that local emergency managers try and do is really understand their communities. And oftentimes we fall into a trap of being problem-centered, right, instead of people-centered. And so emergency managers really try to understand not only the problems and the threats and hazards that exist in the community, but also the strengths. And particular to this audience and this topic, it's so important that we understand that first and foremost, government simply cannot do it alone. You know, there's a lot of resources at the federal and state level. There's fewer resources the closer you get to the community in local emergency management. It's typically 1, 2, 3 people. And I know when I got that job, I was a good student and I read all the doctrine. And the doctrine is deeply informed by the nation's experience going back. We've heard stories about the tragic consequences of disasters like Katrina. And the doctrine is learned, right? And so as an emergency manager, you go to the training, and then you try and understand how do you implement this aspirational doctrine and understand the importance of putting people first. And so I think the local emergency managers here in the room would agree that working in local emergency management is a day-to-day exercise of trying to figure out actionable ways to apply the doctrine in ways that put people first and leverages the strengths of the community. And so I'll use the last couple minutes of my time to tell a little story about how that works. We understood that, the federal government gave us some new preparedness rules for our medical businesses that weren't really understood by those businesses. So we got some support from Akiko's office, where I now work, by the way, to help them understand how to make better emergency preparedness plans. And one of the partners that came to the table during that experience was Northwest Senior and Disability Services. Are you guys in the room here today? Is there anybody from? So they're an intergovernmental organization that provides services to the disability community in the Mid-Valley. And through the understanding, the dialogue, and them coming to our workshops, they began to understand sort of what we understood in terms of the threats and hazards. And then through dialogue, we also began to learn from them more about our community and what specific kinds of needs and strengths existed, particularly with people with disabilities and other functional access needs. And it was so important for us to hear that, right? Because we're daunted by all of these big tasks, and you gotta find ways to find actionable ways to actually put the people up front. So over the course of several workshops, we learned from Northwest Senior and Disability Services, and particularly, we talked about what would happen if the power went out. You know, my wife's a medical social worker, and I know there's a lot of folks in the community that depend on electrically powered medical devices. And so the first thing Northwest Senior and Disability Services asked us for was, well, we'll just put generators out on all those people's homes, right? And that logistically becomes very, very difficult to try and manage. So instead, we found a strategy that instead of putting generators out with all these folks, we just decided that by virtue of knowing each other, we could provide information if something bad was likely to happen, and then bring those folks to the table that serve those communities every day, figure out who in our community would be disproportionately impacted, and then make sure that our efforts reach them. So last summer, about this time, there was a little problem with the drinking water here in Marion County. John, we went through that, right? Greg's back there. Well, you saw the public side of that, right? The big points of distribution where people showed up and got their water and drove off. A lot of folks couldn't drive up to the water points of distribution. So leveraging the partnerships we had with people like Northwest Senior and Disability Services and home health agencies, we developed a list of folks that we knew couldn't, actually fell within the advisory and couldn't get to that point of distribution. They came to the table, they helped us understand the needs of the community, and then became agents of delivering that aid. So with folks like Stan mentioned, and the Oregon Food Bank and Northwest, or Marion Polk Food Share, we're able to use the knowledge gained on one hand from the partner, Northwest Senior Disability Services, that gave us that list of folks that they knew would need that help, and then worked with other voluntary folks, and we're able to work with those partners and meet those needs. So I think that the key lesson here is government just simply can't do it itself. I think we're getting better, and we work every day to try and be better at it at the state, federal, and local level, tribal level. But at the end of the day, it's through these partnerships. We need to meet each other before the disaster. We need to have practical ways we can work together during a disaster, make sure that we put the people up front and that no one gets left behind. It's a huge task, it's aspirational, but like Tracy said, from a position of hope, the idea that we're all here now talking about it is just an important first step forward.
So Neva, Anderson is going to bring us back to a different county, a different part of the state, and how they fit into the picture.
Good morning. I'm Neva Anderson. I'm with Linn County Public Health. I'm the Emergency Preparedness Coordinator. So my role with the county is I'm basically the boots on the ground, being that liaison between the county and the local communities and the integration for policies and plans. Some of the challenges that I face is networking with the community to be able to include planning and resources and making our plans actually real life and applicable to our community as a whole. And like Stan said, making our plans for the community and not just the county's plans or the state's plans. So I just want to stress enough that it is whole community planning involvement and to, like I said, make our plans real life. So thank you again for coming out today, because this is the first step.
Thank you, Neva. And you actually talked a little bit about challenges, which is where we're going to go after we hear from Chad Carter, who's going to discuss a very large, and sometimes it sounded like a maligned role. He's a good guy. Thanks, Chad.
Thank you. You know, sometimes you step into it, sometimes you take it, but we're all here for a great cause. So my name is Chad Carter. I'm the Regional Communications Director for the Red Cross Cascades region, and I'm here because our disaster team is actually undergoing several days of intense training right now, but this event was so important for us to attend and be a part of that we made sure that we had someone here, and I'm actually honored to be here. I've spent time working with Special Olympics in my past, and so this mission and what we're trying to accomplish here today and moving forward is very near and dear to my heart. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here today. The Cascades region of the Red Cross constitutes essentially Oregon, most of Oregon, and 6 counties in southwest Washington. We're an organization that is 90% volunteer-led. We have over 3,000 volunteers here in the state of Oregon and southwest Washington, and it's because of those volunteers that we're able to provide the services that we can, whether it's preparedness or disaster response. Without those volunteers, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And so a lot of times it's a little misunderstood in exactly how the Red Cross works. We don't necessarily choose to open a shelter, but because of our partnerships up here, when we get that question, say, hey, can you get a shelter open? That's when we jump at the chance to activate and to work with them. But we don't necessarily choose to open it ourselves. We get asked by those local agencies. But what I think is really important is that for here today, we have 5 lines of service, but the 2 that are most important are our disaster services and our training services. Talk quickly about training services because those are your first aids, your CPRs, your water safeties, the things that people do in preparation for a disaster or to learn or add to their skill base or to gain information on how to be prepared. I saw there was a prepare guide out on the table. Please stop by and pick that up before you head out today. But then also our disaster services, and that is primarily what we're speaking about today, and how the Red Cross can constantly improve itself to do better. We heard Vance talk a little bit about his experience with shelters. A lot of the folks sitting up here today have experienced shelters, and the most important thing is that the Red Cross never, ever, ever turns anyone away. We will always take the additional steps necessary to make sure that people are going to get the resources and the services they need. That being said, it is critical that as an organization, especially here in Oregon and in Southwest Washington, that we learn and include all points of view, all resources available to us, so that the description that Vance shared earlier about the first time he went to that shelter in California and what he experienced and how significant of a change that can be made in a positive direction for when he returned 3 years later. That is the direction all of us want to go, especially as an organization like the Red Cross. We are a very large national organization, but at the ground level, here in Oregon and Southwest Washington, it is community helping community, it is neighbors helping neighbors, it is someone who you may know who volunteers or works with the Red Cross, or someone who may show up at your house after a home fire one day. But it's those local connections that matter most. And because of the folks here in this room and because of the perspectives that everybody is going to bring to the table, literally and figuratively, we are very excited to move forward on this mission here today so that we can be inclusive. So when a disaster strikes, you show up to a Red Cross shelter and we are prepared to welcome every single person. So thank you very much for allowing me to be here today.
All right. I'm moving to green. I liked Stan's pick a different color. I'm going to move to green for this next section. You just got a lot of information. So I would like everyone just to take a really deep breath right now and exhale it because it will give your cerebellum, your brain, a little oxygen, which we probably don't have. Let's all breathe together. Just take a deep breath and let it out. Make a little noise when you let it out. Let's do it again because it was pretty quiet out there. A really deep breath and let it out. Truthfully, when you've been sitting for a long time, your brain gets deprived sometimes of oxygen, so I want to make sure you have that. We've heard a lot of information. We want to turn this over to you for the next few minutes because I would imagine that there are some questions. I know we have people who will be roving mic folks. Are the roving mic people? Here comes Kristen. Maybe we could have a second one. Thank you. So if you have a question about any of these particular functions, or more importantly, how they work together, or if you are in any way confused, this is a great time to ask them. Just kind of raise your hand, or nod or something. Let the mic people know, and we'll take questions for a few minutes.
I did want to make a point that the folks on the phone will have a chance to ask questions following folks in the room. So sit tight, people on the phone.
We know you're out there. We got a question over there. I see a hand, barely, because the lights are in my eyes, and there's one over there. Good. All right. Thank you, folks.
Good morning. My name is Les Rogers. I'm on the Douglas County Disability Services Advisory Council, and I am blessed to be here today, but I promised I would bring a question or comment from my community following the snowstorm and us getting trapped. Some people were out without power for like a month and a half. So one of the big issues, and I think this will go to Ms. Sato, I'm not sure of your name, was that a lot of people only have a 30-day supply, especially those on OHP, of tube feeding supplies, suction supplies, and to me, I feel like if we could get a 60-day supply on our first delivery and then 30-day supplies every time after that, we can make sure everybody has a 30-day supply on hand, because people are running out. We're having to drive out to the middle of nowhere, provide TPN supplies. People were doing, which is intravenous feedings for those who don't know what TPN is. We were doing the best we could because we couldn't get anything in or out of our area for quite a long time. So that's what I promised I'd bring. I have brought it. There you go.
Well, I really appreciate that. There you go. I appreciate that comment, and the good news is the Oregon Health Plan is part of Oregon Health Authority, so that's a really good comment, and I will bring that back. Thank you.
All right, over there, this house.
Hi, thank you. I am particularly interested in a planning regarding children in schools and reunification, so after a disaster. So I'm wondering which of your agencies partners with the Department of Education at the top level, and then at the ESD level, which is where our kids with disabilities receive services. And I'm even very curious about those kids in private schools that may not be tied into other schools. So can you tell me about your agencies and how you're working with children serving agencies? Thanks.
I think I'll start with that. I've moved to wine country now. I've got the grape microphone, so. And we are in wine country. No, seriously, that's an excellent question, and there's a lot of work that is being done on that now. We have a few initiatives, and I'm going to look through the audience and put Jeremy Wells on the spot. Where are you at, or Bryce? I'm going to want to get a microphone over to Bryce to talk about what the Department of Education is doing after I'm done. To put this in context, the mass care emergency management programming and planning, we're late to the table. Department of Human Services understood the dynamics of what really needed to be done back in 2013, and in 2014 when I came on board, we started to really refocus our efforts on the mass care issues. Right now we are working on developing a state family reunification plan. I think we have meetings scheduled in July with Fema. There's been some ongoing work with that over the last few years. We had an initial kickoff, Anna, correct me, I want to say it was 2 years ago, about 2 years ago. You got to shake your head really. 1 year ago, so okay, thank you. Where we got school districts and all types of organizations that work with children and family reunification. We met over at the Emergency Coordination Center at Oregon Emergency Management. That was an initial kickoff. It got stalled a little bit through some fires and through Senate Bill 850, and this project was running in tandem with that. But we're picking that back up in July with family reunification. We are also working with the Early Learning Division And we also work closely. The other thing that my office is responsible for is continuity of operations for the 5 major programs in the Department of Human Services. So we are engaged very closely with the Child Welfare Division, or Child Welfare Program, in their continuity of operations and how we maintain connection with foster parents and other children throughout the state that are impacted by disasters. And I would like Bryce to talk a little bit about the new initiative that the Oregon Department of Education is pushing right now.
Yes, my name is Bryce McKenna. I'm brand new with Oregon Department of Education. I am their Emergency Management Director as of the beginning of May. And just really briefly, I'll keep this really
Bryce, could you stand up,
Yep.
please, so people
Sorry.
can see? Thank you.
I'll keep this really brief, but we're statewide, we're behind the curve in this particular area, emergency planning for schools. But there are a few school districts that are ahead of the curve. So there are some great examples and best practices that are going to get shared around the state. Recently, the Oregon Department of Education received a grant from U.S. Department of Education for 5 years to assist the education service districts and the school districts with developing and implementing emergency operations plans. So we are kicking off this work right now. We're utilizing the Fema model, the Guide to Emergency Management for Schools, and the Readiness and Emergency Management for Schools that provides a lot of resources, training, and tools. So there's state funding where we're going to be entering into intergovernmental agreements with some regional partners in the education service districts around the state to go around to all 197 school districts and deliver emergency operations plans training over the next 5 years. Also recently, if you may have heard, the Student Success Act passed in the Legislative Assembly and was signed by Governor Brown that provides state funding for companion and complementary work to address suicide intervention, postvention, prevention, bullying and harassment intervention, and threat assessment work. So all of this is going to dovetail together. The state funding and the federal funding, our initial round of training is going to be a 2-day program where the first day is kind of focused on emergency operations plan and some practical exercise and implementation. Day 2 of the training is going to involve a lot of the work that's funded at the state level. And it's an exciting time, and we are ramping this up. We're going to be hitting the meat of the work in earnest this fall, and it should pick up and just take off over the course of the next 5 years. There's a lot of planning yet to be worked out, but yeah, there are going to be a lot of, we've got a steering committee, an advisory committee, that multidisciplinary, multi-agency that involves advocacy groups, members of Department of Human Services, Department of Education, school districts, a lot of great partners, law enforcement, Office of Emergency Management. So we're getting the right partners, we're getting the right stakeholders, and we're trying to build this up so we can take off with it. So if any of you have any questions during the break or lunch and you'd like a little more information, feel free to seek me out, and I'll talk to you about in more detail about some of the things we've done so far and are planning to do.
Thank you. I just want to, he used the word ramping up and stakeholders. I want to use this as an opportunity to remind you all that one of the outcomes of today is going to be the creation of this statewide advisory council, which will be working on behalf of citizens all across the state. And so areas that you may feel, your question about education, are missing, or partners who need to be invited to be part of that advisory council, our commitment is that it will be 2/3 people with disabilities. We want to make sure that the power balance is equalized, but many people with disabilities also serve in agencies. And if you would like to serve on that advisory council by the end of today, please let us know if you have a recommendation for a group or an organization or the word stakeholder, an interest group that really needs to be part of this in real people terms. Please let us know, because we want to make that group representative. I, for example, am very aware as I look around the room that in spite of trying desperately to make sure that we had a lot of folks from the immigrant community, and they did show up for the focus groups, the room today is predominantly dominant culture. We've got some still room to go to make sure that we have representation of other cultural groups. I'm not going to put people on the spot and ask them to identify their sexual orientation, but we want to make sure, since we know people with disabilities are often members of quote, non-traditional sexual orientations. We want to make sure those voices are part of the table too. So we're gonna hold ourselves accountable, but we need your help to do so. And I think there was another question out there, right? The light, yes, thank you.
Hello, my name's Donna Harris, and I started an employee resource group for persons with disabilities at Oregon Health Authority, and also I'm on the City of Portland Neighborhood Emergency Team. And I started a workshops to teach people with disabilities emergency preparedness. So one of the major concerns that I'm hearing over and over again is service animals. What is being done to incorporate service animals into shelters and into evacuations and things like that? Because a lot of people are feeling that I've talked to are not going to leave their homes if they do not have a place to go that accepts their, the service animals.
Huge issue. Who wants to field that one from the panel?
This is Justin with Multnomah County, and I want to, since you live in the Portland area, I want to address specifically what's happening in Multnomah County, and this is really true nationwide. No, you can't turn away somebody with a service animal, and so there's something to be, if there are people who still believe that they would be turned away with service animals, we have, as emergency management professionals, we have some work to do on our messaging, because they have every legal right to be in a shelter, and they wouldn't be turned away. But that's not to say that they haven't been historically, and so I can see where that fear is, but we're really moving in the right direction in that. And I want to say, for Multnomah County, we run our shelters alongside with the Red Cross, but we take ultimate responsibility for our shelters. And in Multnomah County, we won't turn away pets either. So, but we recently did an evacuation of 3,000 people, and a lot of those people, English was their second language. And while we did some messaging around that everybody's welcome with their pets, people didn't go because they just assumed that they weren't able to get in there with their pets. And so there's a lot to be done, I think, on our behalf to get the message down. I think my friend from the Red Cross has something.
Yeah, I would absolutely echo that sentiment. Service animals are always welcome at any Red Cross shelter. There are shelters, as was just said, that might not be a Red Cross shelter. They might be independent. They might be set up by counties. But any Red Cross shelter, a service animal is welcome. And to your point about people not wanting to leave pets behind, that is critically important that people understand that while in some shelters, pets especially, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Red Cross, while all pets might not be welcome in a specific shelter, we work hand in hand with local partner agencies, and we will work to establish an animal shelter either immediately next door or as close as possible to a shelter, so that individuals can continue to monitor their pets, continue to make sure they are being well taken care of, they are safe, because we know the strong connection that resides there. And so we want to make sure that people will come to our shelters with their pets, and we will work to make sure that those pets get to a safe place.
And Nyla, if I could just
Sure.
comment, at the conference I was at last week, the state of Washington has developed a pretty straightforward evacuation toolkit for humans to fill out, put your contact information, your medical information, your prescription information. It's pretty straightforward. I'll get it to Stan and to Anna for consideration and planning. But they also had a page for pets, so you can plan for your pets too and record the relevant information, so when you do need to leave with your service animal, that you can have documentation around your service animal's names, its needs, its medications, its food type. So I'll make sure that it's really straightforward, very simple, but a very valuable tool. I'll make sure I get that to Stan and Anna for consideration.
Thank you. Rodney and Prosperity, my pets, are grateful to hear all of this. Actually, we have to move on to one last question because of time, and the polite gentleman in a sort of salmon-colored shirt, which I can't see, salmonberry, is going to have that question. Thank you.
My name is John Grimm. My wife is disabled. I run 2 neurological adult foster cares, and I'm the SCIU 503 Local 858 president, which is the president of all the adult foster care DD homes and mental health homes that the providers live in their homes and take Medicaid. So I kind of more comments. I appreciate what the gentleman said about the 60 days, because that was going to be one of the things I brought up. You might add like insulin and life medications that are really important. I mean, people can get away without taking some medications, but like insulin would be one would be nice on that list. DHS has done great with the adult foster homes. A few years ago, you guys sent out a kind of a booklet to help us. It's more of a 3-day, plan for emergencies and stuff. It would really be nice to have something a little longer, and maybe even with something like that, who to contact for if you need, peg tube, for feeding tubes or medications or whatever, how they could get a hold of somebody to do that. Because not everybody's going to know that. A lot of adult foster cares are all over and it's hard to communicate, so something like that would be nice. I've also participated in a Red Cross evacuation once with my wife and 3 other residents, and it was a good experience. I feel like Red Cross learned something as well, and then that kind of jumps me back to DHS. I think more training on sheltering in place, if possible, would be much better, because the Red Cross basically said, here, this is your area.
Sir, you've got so many
Sorry,
great,
that was kind of, yeah.
So many great suggestions. Please, in the work in the afternoon, bring those up, make sure they end up on your list and get carried forward. But if you have a specific question, this would be a great time to answer. But for all those suggestions, capture them. We don't want to lose any of them.
Okay. Nope, they were more comments. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Nyla, can I?
Yes.
Can I comment real quickly on that? Because we are doing some work. One of the things that my office really is just, it's something that we picked up out of California and work on the campfire. And there's 2 things I'll approach on that. We are just establishing and trying to pilot what we're calling AERO, which is the Auxiliary Emergency Response Operations. DHS has 8,500 employees throughout the state. And one of the things we want to do is provide a higher level of training in emergency management operations and be able to, during times of disaster, redirect those employees into our emergency management system and have them boots on the ground, similar to the way Oregon Public Health and Akiko's program operates, to have liaisons. APD is very much a part of that, and that's one of the places, APD and Child Welfare are the 2 that we are going to work together to pilot this program and develop it so we can have a better response throughout the state. And the other thing I'll say real quickly related to the animals, Ryan Scholes, who is with the Oregon Department of Agriculture, he's a state veterinarian, also responded to the campfire, and he and I have connected a couple times. 2020, we hope to start devising a state sheltering plan, not that the state will open up shelters, but how we can assist counties. And the lessons learned from Oregon Department of Agriculture going down through EMAC to assist with the animal population and the work that I was able to do on the sheltering population, we want to pull that together and have a better effective response at the state level for dealing with animals and shelters. Thanks.
Hey, just briefly from a local perspective, I'd encourage you to work within your structure to encourage folks that manage these shelters, these adult foster care homes, to link up with their local emergency managers. It's so important that we understand where those facilities are located and what particular needs they would have, right? So that when we see flood, hurricane, tornado, whatever may be taking place in a particular location, we can know what that impact may be to those facilities. And also, in the event of isolation, make sure we know what supplies like insulin and oxygen we need to get out in a timely fashion. So again, that local lash up is so important.
So now we're going to open up the telephone lines. I feel like it's a telethon, but it's not, thankfully. So those of you who are still with us, thank you. This is an amazing experience. If you had questions for the panel, this is a great time to let us know. And I have no idea how we received them. I believe, there we go, Kristen's got it.
Okay, hi. I'd like to ask the operator to open it up for questions, please. And folks in the room, thank you for your patience. We're going to give our folks just a minute to get their questions, and I will help to relay them to our panelists.
While she does that, I'll let you know that when we're finished with this, we will have a break. Don't leave yet. And when we come back from it, we're going to move to the perspective of individuals with disabilities who have had emergency or catastrophic situations. We're going to hear from some folks their recommendations, their experiences, and that will kind of be the way we'll salt the bank for the afternoon conversations for you guys to do that. So I wanted to let you know that we want to make sure we heard all the way through the cycle, including folks. And actually, I'm going to turn it over and ask some of you.
Okay, we're going to have just a quiet minute so the operator can talk to the folks on the phone. Thank you very much. And folks on the phone, you can always also text me your questions to 971-888-3358.
Thank you. So I would like to give a round of applause to the panelists up here and to you guys for your questions. So let's do that. Thank you so much. This is your break time. If we could be back in the room ready to convene at 11:15, you'll see that our agenda's been flexed and adjusted a little bit, but don't worry because we'll be catching it up in time for your lunch. And I know food is like at Maslow, very bottom level. We need to take care of you. So thank you so much again.
backlight a little bit.
Yes, well, I've
at the
actually
end.
asked them to send for him.
Yes.
Was he feeling badly?
I don't think anyone showed him where the restroom was, and so that he went that whole morning session without having access to a restroom. So
that's
when
horrible.
I was trying to check in with him to see, but that's kind of a
Although
really
I did announce it from the podium, but somebody should have escorted him.
well, and it's kind of difficult to describe the navigation in here,
Right.
and that's kind of a personal question. I've never had it before. It's a very personal question.
Yeah, of course it is. Oh man, I'll apologize to him later. I'm yelling it. Yes. Yes. Okay. Okay. I am going to begin the process of pulling us back together. Thank you. You were so responsive. I was talking slowly and purposefully. While we're waiting to begin our next panel, I'm going to read some of the questions. So those of you out in TV land or internet land, I'm showing my age, will know that we heard them and they're going to be addressed. This is left over from the last panel. So I thought those of you in the audience here in real life would probably appreciate hearing those too. So we were asked, how is this information and training getting back out to people who are receiving services and direct service providers, which is a great question because we know that the communication chain is the place where things break down. What I want to tell you is that one of our hopes is that the new Disability Advisory Council will be involved in helping in their work plan figure out ways to fill those gaps so that they don't continue to go on in the future. Emergency management can get more real that way, and the people, those of you out there, are going to honestly have a lot of great ideas because you're the experts. Those of us up here may be the experts by virtue of having this in our hands, but you're the real experts, and that's why the afternoon is going to be devoted to hearing things from you guys. So that's kind of an answer to your question. It's not 100% concrete, but that council is going to try to make it so. Second question, how are behavioral health issues being integrated? Also a great question. I can let you know that systems-wide, both OHA or Oregon Health Association, because I notice that many of us tend to speak in acronyms, and not everybody understands the acronyms to mean the same thing. They might mean different things. So I'm just going to put this plug out here that for the rest of the day we avoid using acronyms and take the moment and the time to actually spell things out so nobody feels stupid for not knowing or is afraid to ask or thinks it's the wrong one. Behavioral health, they're working together at the local community. I want to reassure everybody, especially those of you out there who asked the question, that there was a lot of outreach that I made to people who are consumers, particularly to ask about mental health and psychological outreach and inclusion issues. And so they have been involved in the recommendations that are in the report and will continue to be so and will be represented on the council. Thirdly, will the emergency planning in schools efforts include support to purchase transfer equipment? Well, we'd love to say to you, absolutely, yes, of course, that makes total sense. But the reality is we don't have an answer to that question right now. So that's another place I think where your advocacy efforts are going to be important, whether you're on the council or not. There are going to be ways for every person in this room, every person out there listening, to be involved with this. And quite frankly, I'm going to talk about that emergency council for a moment because I think that a lot of you who stopped me in the hall to ask how we were going to make decisions about it have questions, and for those of you who are out there, you have questions. So here's the deal. If you're in the room right now, there's a pad of paper on the table. If you believe that you want to personally be involved or serve on the Disabilities Council, the Emergency Managers Council, we would like you to give us your name and, of course, contact information. I would like to ask you to list what group you represent or what constituency you'll be representing, because this is not going to be a council of people who are only there representing themselves. I've served on so many commissions and councils where people didn't understand the reality is that when you're there, you have a trust to represent a much wider audience. So we need to know what audience you're speaking for, representing, and tell us why you want to be involved, and maybe give us some information about how you would plan to network with people in your community and do that. We're going to get a lot more requests, I know already, than we're going to have spaces to fill. And I want to remind everybody who's spoken of interest to this that our goal is to make this 2/3 people with disabilities and 1/3 people without. So priority, obviously will be to balance that, as well as all the other factors I talked about. I don't want it just to be, frankly, a bunch of white middle-class people. I say that as one. You're welcome. Though I didn't start middle class, I'm happy to have pulled myself up by my bootstraps. And I know that many of you have too. So we also just really want to balance it for many, many factors, for population, for age, for type of disability. It will be cross disability, for race and ethnicity, for sexual orientation, lots of reasons. So if you want to be involved, then this is your opportunity to let us know why you fit those categories and how you would help to make that a full group. The other question I was asked about the council, people, I'm sorry, out there, you don't have those pieces of paper in front of you. So there's an email address, and actually if you don't feel comfortable doing it right now, you could use the email address. Send the same information that I'm asking you to turn into the registration desk, I think I forgot to say that, today before you leave. Send it to the email address, and as part of the same nomination process. And also, if you think there's somebody that's not you, but that you think would be a really great person to serve, go ahead and tell us who they are, and we'll do some outreach, sort of like, not me, somebody else, but it helps us to know too. So our goal, we don't know how often it will meet yet. The council itself will be the group that will basically decide that, based somewhat on funding realities. Let's get real, we're gonna have to support this group appropriately. And that's again where all of you can take an active role, because you can contact your agency department heads and say, this is a priority, we need to make sure that this is properly funded. Conversations about whether or not it would evolve into a privately funded thing will happen, and our goal will be to move the meetings around the state so that those of you who are out there who couldn't be with us today, and those of you who traveled a long way to get here, can share that burden, frankly, with others, so that it won't always be happening in Salem. So any questions briefly about that before I move on? And I believe, Kristen, did you have a question from somebody on the phone? No. Okay. Anybody else have any questions about serving on the Disability Council that I didn't mention? I just got to say, I am so excited that something that doesn't exist yet and is a dream and an intention is already getting so many of you to recognize the possibilities. I think we really will have a chance to do some proactive systems change. And I know you all want to be part of it. And if you're not sitting on the council, you still will have an incredible opportunity to participate, because the council is going to be reaching out to you, or you're going to be reaching back to the council. We want to keep as many people as possible involved. What I said at the beginning of the morning is so true. We're all on this journey together. The more minds, the more bodies, the more commitment, the more heart that we bring to it, the more successful it's going to be. And we want it to be successful, right? Right? Yeah, okay. So now I'm going to bring forward the panel of individuals with disabilities who have agreed to share some of their experiences with emergency management. I'm going to let those of you who are involved with emergency management know that they are not here to be mean to you, but in some cases they may have some recommendations for the group. And after they've spoken, I'm going to open it up to the audience, both electronically and in person, to talk about that. So without further ado, I'm going to bring forward, and this panel has changed a couple times by its nature. I'm going to ask, who do I have? So I have Nicholas Johnson coming up. Nicholas from Portland, Oregon. Again, you can read the bios. I had the great privilege of working with Nicholas on the the Portland Commission on Disability, so I know Nicholas. And then we've got Ruth McEwen, who is coming up, who I think lives in Salem. I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you. Philip, are you in the audience? Philip Wolf? Thank you. And I'm going to wait because Philip is deaf and will be looking at the interpreters. Go ahead, have a seat, sorry. Let me move this out of the way for you. Go for it. Philip, you did not have a chance to get your bio into the book, so I'm going to start with you, let you introduce yourself to the audience for a couple of minutes extra so they know who you are. And we're going to begin with hearing from the folks who are here. Thank the three of you for being up here with me so much. Thank you for coming.
Hi, everyone. I'm Philip Wolf. I'm from here in Portland. First, I want to thank you all for welcoming me here to share giving me this opportunity to share about my experience here and the ideas I have for improving accessibility during emergencies in Portland. I've lived in Portland now for 10 years, and accessibility truly has been a struggle there. I want to say Portland as a city is a disability. So I'll go into more of that later, but a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in New York, and then I moved to Los Angeles and lived there for 10 years. I was a professor of styling there. I lived in Las Vegas just for 9 months. I couldn't stand all the heat and the people and just that whole feel of Vegas, you know. It's a good place for vacation. It's not a great place to live. Then I traveled around Europe for a while, ended up back in Los Angeles and then Seattle for 7 years, and now I've landed here in Portland. So I have lived in many different cities, in many different areas, and I've seen the resources available and what can be done with accessibility, especially in big cities, and what can be done for emergency readiness. When I got to Portland, it was like entering a new world. It took me a year, really, to realize that Portland, as a deaf person, it's really the worst place you can live. Even though I love Portland, don't get me wrong, the mountains, the nature, the people, the clean air, you know, it's just the right size as not quite a huge city, but and it feels very much at home, but the accessibility is lacking completely. So that's put me in a situation that's forced me to really take a look at things and take some legal action, even to the point of suing the city of Portland to try and get some accessibility. I joined the Portland Commission for Disabilities, and so I've been involved with that for the last 13 years. And then I became the chair of the City Oversight Committee, working with law enforcement. And I've worked with 3 or 4 different organizations. I'm going to ask Chad Ludwig here in the front to help me out with this, but there was an organization fighting for captioning on all public televisions. It was the Oregon Association of the Deaf. There's also the Hearing Loss Association of America, the Oregon chapter. And what was that other one, Chad? The Oregon Captioning Project. So a number of other organizations fighting for accessibility rights in Portland, and we've been able to pass that law requiring captioning on all public television. So that was a big step in this fight. And then I was hired by the Department of Public Safety and Standards training here that's just outside Salem here. I have a 6-month contract with them, with the law enforcement there, doing role-playing to educate and expose cadets that are becoming law enforcement officers to how to interact with deaf individuals. Deaf individuals who are interacting with law enforcement, whether they are the perpetrators or the victims. So that's been an exciting move as well. And now I'm making connections with law enforcement in Portland. And it's great now that when I see officers out and about on the streets, I've already interacted with them during those role plays. So we're seeing some improvements being made, but that's a bit about my background, my bio, and I'm just focused on improving the accessibility for deaf people in Portland. Just a few things I wanted to share quickly for you to start thinking over. Portland has 17 bureaus, and only 7 of them so far have received American with Disabilities Act training. And that's a big concern because ADA training, I believe, should be provided to everyone from somebody with a disability. They have that lived experience, and they can really share that information with everyone who will be those gatekeepers and providing access so that we can improve partnership. That would be my first recommendation about how to improve it. Oh, I'm sorry, did you not understand what I just said? I asked the interpreter to stop interpreting for a moment to make a point about microphones. The interpreters and microphones are not only for me to gain accessibility, but for you all to access what we have to share. So that gives you a little taste of what it's like not to have access to communication being shared from a platform. Oftentimes at political events, at emergency, when there's messages going out about emergencies, hearing people are very focused on making sure that the technology works, that the microphones work, that the cameras work, and deaf people's needs are put off until the very end and oftentimes are never addressed. So anytime you're thinking about microphones, you should also be thinking about interpreters or captioning. A few things related specifically to emergencies. In Portland, if you're in a great deal of pain, some emergency is happening and you need an ambulance, what do? You call 911 and an ambulance comes. Oftentimes, when a deaf person calls 911, they call for an ambulance and they also require that they also request an interpreter. And there's been breakdown after breakdown of providing those communication services. The ambulance arrives and the deaf person is trying to communicate with the EMT through gesture and other ineffective modes of communication during this highly emotional situation. And that just exacerbates any emergency situation. And then the emergency personnel are responding without having full information about what the actual situation is, which can lead to very detrimental consequences. So we have to look at each situation and think about what could have improved those outcomes for individuals who are deaf, individuals who are deaf-blind, individuals who are deaf and also experiencing mental illness, and all the great diversity that runs through the deaf community. We currently have about 192,000 deaf people in the state of Oregon, and that includes a broad range of deafness, deaf-blindness, hard of hearing, people who became deaf later in life, people who are deaf and have additional disabilities, and it runs the gamut. So wrapping up, there's some foundation, some background, and I'm happy to answer questions and have dialogue, but first and foremost, we need to focus on law enforcement, emergency personnel such as EMTs, mental health, and responding and emergency plans, keeping deaf and hard of hearing individuals in those plans. I think in my apartment complex, I have 4 or 5 deaf neighbors, as well as other neighbors who have different disabilities. And I'm thinking we need to have a roster that if an emergency happens, the fire department or other responders need to be ready to know where those individuals are living, what their barriers are, how to respond, how to communicate with them, and so forth, because currently they're not prioritized, so they can easily get locked out, miss critical communications, and so forth. The able-bodied are easily evacuated, and the hearing people are easily made aware of the emergencies, and so they all have positive outcomes. We have the same issue with transportation, with snowdrifts not being cleared, where the accessibility vans are not able to get out of the garages that they're in order to evacuate those who need them. Sorry, I'm going on and on. I'll wrap up for now, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Philip. We gave Philip extra time. The panelists were asked to kind of operate under the same guidelines as the earlier panelists with the 4-minute thing for time, but he filled in at the last minute, and I thank you again so much. Some people who were from remote parts of Oregon who were going to be on this panel were not able to make it. So now I'm going to talk to, or you're going to listen to, I'm not going to talk, to Nicholas Johnson, who is going to describe some of his experiences with emergency management and perhaps his recommendations. Nicholas.
Hi there. My name is Nicholas Johnson. I'm from Portland, Oregon, born and raised an Oregonian. And to give you a little information about the diversity in Oregon, it's kind of misrepresentative. If you can Google the population of Oregon, it's 4.1 million people in the state of Oregon. 2.2% are classified as Black Americans, which makes that 83,000. There are 493,000 Hispanics and 149,000 Asians in the state. So we are now classified as probably the third minority because of population has grown in other areas due to other outside circumstances. But in our community that I've experienced, I represent Prison Fellowship, and it's a nonprofit organization helping and interacting with the Department of Corrections, that's federal or state and local, in helping people that are incarcerated, especially now with disabilities because they've been misclassified, coming out and getting back into the community and not wanting to recycle the same old felons and people that have impacted on our society in a negative way, but trying to change the lives. And we've noticed that the system, government, is not designed to change people's lives. It's there to assist and govern the masses. But when you're dealing with individuals that impact communities, neighborhoods, families, and entire cities, you have to deal with it on an individual basis, and you have to start at a grassroots situation, and that's what I do. And I've been ordained since '06, and I've been working with Prison Fellowship as a member of the organization since that, and also with the Department of Corrections. I've had some problems internally in my own family dealing with that, especially not from per se with the Portland Police Department impacting in a negative way, like it's trying to be categorized or characterized by some other organizations that you see on the late night news TV. But it's more of inactive or ineptitude, or not, or saying that, well, we don't have the manpower. Even when somebody was murdered in front of my house because there was a speakeasy going on, and the police weren't didn't want to get involved until pressured, but then they didn't do any investigation afterwards, even though it was listed in front page in the Portland Tribune and gang situations. So we've had to take direct response in our own communities in the Northeast area where there's a large congestion of people of color there. And with our churches, like we've always done, interneting and networking with that. The organizations that we've had dealt with and still do, which I deal with, is DHS, which has been very helpful in assisting me with my mother, who's also blind. She's in a wheelchair and she suffers from 4 mental disabilities. I've had to come, when I went blind due to an inheritance disease of glaucoma 20 years ago, I had to get my education, get re-educated, and also learning how to live with a disability that totally transformed my life from an auditor and a controller, where I had to seek out new employment because I wasn't able to verify what you have to be able to see. So I had to come down here to Salem and live and go through the system of that you have down, that you used to have down here in Salem, which was the School of the Blind and Deaf, that was closed, I think, back in '06. But anyway, it really helped me. And after I got my education, retrained, and new career in stock brokering and brokering foreign currency, and entering into the prison fellowship and also mentoring men and women, setting up a new life down here, I had to go back and take care of my mother because she was neglected, and this impacted on her home, which she had lost one and was in dire straits of losing the other, which had foreclosed. So the state wasn't there to help me in finances, but because of the situation that I was in, Prison Fellowship actually assisted me in directing me to different agencies, nonprofit agencies that were there to assist me. And when I was going into the Oregon Commission of the Blind up in Portland as a client, learning Braille and also learning at that time, which was XP, which is, been retired. What happened was they were able to direct me to some other agencies, nonprofit agencies that haven't been mentioned here today, like Neighbors of, Neighbors of, Rebuilding Neighbors. These are nonprofit organizations that work with one another, that are able to assist you in helping you further your home remodeling. But was really instrumental, which was CVI, Community Vision Inc., which helped me after the home was foreclosed, because I used all my savings in trying to remodel the home, and also legal work in trying to prevent other family members in taking the home and selling the home by forging documents. And that does happen in families. It's not spoken of, but it does happen in families where other family members will come in and steal your property or steal your items of your dead loved ones, or those that are incapable of taking care of themselves. So you not only have these outside crisis situations that rarely occur, but the ones that do occur are often overlooked or ignored because they're considered taboo. And nobody really wants to talk about their dirty laundry in their own family, or brothers or sisters, or aunts and uncles acting a fool. They really wanted to focus on something else that somebody else is doing. But this happened in my family, which almost put my mother and myself destitute. So, I'm sorry about that. So, but these organizations do help. And to get caught up with them, you really need to interact with your DHS and other services in your community level, because those are the only ones that really know you or can help you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicholas. If we would have had a lot more time, I wouldn't have dinged you, but if we get between people and their food, they will let us know. While they've been discussing Portland, both Philip and Nicholas, I want you to hopefully recognize that the issues that they are talking about exist all across the state. They're not Portland specific, though perhaps a couple of cases that Philip talked about that particular group. But if you look at the report that you have, you'll see comments from people all across the state echoing similar sentiments. Okay, Ruth, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
I'm Ruth McEwen. I'm from Salem, and I spend a lot of my time, major part of my time, at the legislature when it's in session. And that's how I really got it tied into people with disabilities, in that I worked on creating the Oregon Disabilities Commission. And that was my first really getting involved. And then from there, I became a part of Northwest Senior and Disability Services Advisory Councils. And so most of my work has been between either the legislature or the disability services. But what they asked me to come and share for you today is my experience with needing all of a sudden somebody taking care of what's happening, is that I was woke up by somebody pounding on my door, and my place was on, the duplex next to me was on fire. And so I was already been put to bed and was settled for the night. And the only thing I knew to do to communicate with whoever was outside was I just flipped the light on and off to let them know that I knew there was somebody there. So then the policeman broke down the door, they came in, they saw the situation, and to my utter surprise, they didn't just grab a hold of me and try to get me out of my bed into my chair. The guy says, now how are we going to do this? What do we need to do? Which to me was the answer for everything, because I was able to tell them, they followed what I asked. When it came time for me to get out the door, where the ramp was the side where the fire was, so they had to take me out the other door that has steps. And their next question was, how are we going to get you out the door? And I explained to them what to do. I turned my chair backwards, started out the door to go down the stairs backwards, and said, one of you guys get down there, just keep me from flipping over backwards. And they got me out, and it was pouring rain. They called an ambulance to come. 4 firemen picked me and my wheelchair up and set me in the ambulance so that I was out of the weather, out of the rain. Then they decided that I was not going to be able to go back in and stay, even though the fire was not in my part, but that there was still smoke damage. They tried to figure out what they were going to do, and I told them that I had a friend that I could go to, but we didn't know how they were going to transport me. So what they did is they left me in the back of the ambulance, drove me out towards Silverton to my friends. They called the Marion County Fire Department. 4 firemen from the Marion County Fire Department met us there. They lifted me back out of that ambulance onto the ground so I could go into my friend's place. And the key thing that I have to offer on this is the people that were doing the emergency care were people that were willing to listen, they were willing to ask questions, and didn't come in with the idea that they were going to take care of me, but they knew that they had to do something, and they asked. And you couldn't have had better care, and things couldn't have worked out better.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Ruth has brought up a really, go ahead, applaud. I was going to have it for everybody at the end. A really important point, which is the self-determination. And as we heard across the state, for those of you who are in the audience who are emergency managers, asking people what their needs are, and of course in an emergency situation, sometimes you don't have time for a whole checklist, but being responsive to the person as an individual is key, and she's just highlighted that, and thank you. You notice that the people are starting to bring food-based items to your table because you will be eating at your tables. And so I hope we can just let them continue to serve. As Mark King, who has joined us at the end now, has a chance to share some of his perspectives. Thank you, Mark.
Hi, my name is Mark King. I've been disabled for 39 years. I am on a ventilator, which requires electricity. Mainly, problems I've had is when it gets really cold out and it goes below freezing, transformers blow, electricity goes out. And I have to have electricity pretty soon. My thing is I keep emergency batteries. I have a generator. Back in 2010, our electricity went out for like 2 days, and we had to do my generator. Thank goodness we don't. I don't have to get out real fast. So we have a paper in our house that describes what needs plugged in first, second, third. And we get that done. We keep plenty of gas. So I have like a good, 5-6 hours. We can always go get more gas. And if there's a fire, we call the fire department ahead of time. They come out to our house. They assess the best way to get me out. They put it in their computer, so if there is ever a fire, they know what to do. They know I'm on a ventilator. They know they gotta bring some kind of converter out. And then of course the wind. The wind is another bad one, where trees fall. I've had my neighbor had a tree fall on electricity. And again, we follow our routine and get me hooked up quick, efficiently, without any problems. So basically what I'm trying to say, to always be prepared for your generator gas. You call the electric company and notify them they can't bring generators out, but they will make you priority, or make me priority. And that's about my experience so far. I haven't had to live through anything yet, other than lack of electricity. But I'm trying to say, always be prepared and have everything all ready for you. That's about it.
Thank you. Mark. So Mark described something that is so critical that also did come up in the reports, which has to do with having a personal safety and emergency plan. And I'm just curious, I always sort of like to ask this question, whether you're a person with a disability or not, how many people in this audience have really well-developed emergency plans in place in their home or their cars for traveling? Look around, those of you who are visual. For those of you who are not, that would be like maybe a 10th of the audience that I'm seeing. So this was a great reminder for me working on this project and listening to what Mark has said. We all need to develop emergency plans for ourselves, our friends, our pets, our families, because we can't expect emergency managers to know all, be all, do all. And so thank you, Mark, for demonstrating that you have some of that in place. And it is high noon. I was going to hopefully turn this over to folks in the audience, but I know you'd probably rather eat your lunch at lunchtime. And in fact, at 1 o'clock, we will begin the work at tables, in which time your personal experiences are going to be the expertise that you'll share with your table in response to some questions. We'll talk more about that after lunch, but get to talk to your table mates, find out who they are. If you already know them, ask them something you haven't asked them before. Thank you so much to the people who were able to be on this panel here today. Thank you, those of you who are out there. It's lunchtime. Enjoy your lunches too. And we'll all connect at 1. Thank you very much to you guys.